Hello. Well, I am tired, and I am here to talk about tonight. Kind of a weird one because it's a 13-year-old movie. That movie in question is Punisher Warzone. I have never seen this movie before. I saw the original Punisher. Well, not the original Punisher. The original Punisher was a movie from the 80s with Dolph Lundgren. I never seen that one. But there was a Punisher in the early 2000s starring Thomas Jane and John Travolta that I saw. That was pretty good. That was a far more serious movie than this one. But this one, Punisher Warzone, came out in late 2008. And from what I understand, it did not do very well because it kind of came and went in theaters, and I think it didn't make a whole lot of money at all. The movie stars Ray Stevenson as the Punisher, Frank Castle. And if you don't know anything about the Punisher from the Marvel Comics, he's he's a vigilante, very much a vigilante, more so than any other superhero. He comes out of that sort of like that late 60s, early 70s theme, especially that ran through movies of the guy who just had to clean up all like the filth in society. It was born out of the very lawlessness of the cities at the time, especially in New York City, where there was high crime and people were afraid of street gangs and shit. So there were a lot of movies and stuff about, guys, who couldn't take it anymore and were just going on killing sprees, killing criminals on the streets because why not? The Punisher was a character born out of that. So that's what he does. He just kills people. Unlike other superheroes who just, beat people up or put them in jail or stuff, Frank just has no problems killing people because his skill set is that he was just a really good soldier. So killing and just, killing people is what he's good at. And he does that a lot in this movie. This movie is ridiculously violent. And I do emphasize on ridiculously. Like I said, the movie came out in 2008, which is around the same year that Iron Man came out, the first major Marvel movie that Marvel produced themselves before they ended up being purchased by Disney. And the way the Marvel movies kind of changed things for superhero movies, particularly the way Marvel did things, this was like the last, or definitely one of the last movies that was not under Marvel's control, that was about their characters. It wasn't the last, but it was definitely one of the last. It was also one of the last movies that kind of represented that action movie, the theme of action movies that ran through from the late 90s through most of the 2000s, of just, utterly ridiculous action movies, which you don't really see anymore. Even action movies try to be serious nowadays. It was kind of like the last final evolution of the 80s action movies, which are just perfect insanity and ridiculousness. With the cheesy one-liners and the ridiculous characters. So many of the main actors were just like roided up fucking muscled guys, and by the late 2000s it seemed slightly grittier, but there was still a lot of the ridiculousness, like just the overabundance of like a contemporary rock and roll music that plays throughout, and the acting is so fucking terrible, and the storyline is almost non-existent. It just jumps from scene to scene without any explanation, and it's just, this movie has all of that. Plus on top of it, just ridiculous violence and gore. It's exactly what it should be. It's perfect with its stupidity. The violence is so ridiculous in this movie, it's almost cartoonish. It would be straight up cartoonish if it wasn't so gory. But you know what? The Punisher should be a violent movie. Like I said, the movie stars Ray Stevenson as Frank Castle, the Punisher. He starts off the movie by killing a family of gangsters, the head of which had just gotten off in a jury trial. They didn't say, or a jury trial, at trial he had just been acquitted, and to which a lot of people in New York were angry about, because it seemed like he'd been acquitted by having a witness against him murdered. Apparently this witness was killed by his nephew, Billy Rosati. In the comic books, Billy Rosati is just called Billy Russo, but I guess for some reason they wanted to make him seem more Italian. Everything about this movie is so ridiculous. Like, all the gangsters talk so ridiculously. They all have that exaggerated Italian New York accent. Like, hey, yo, they all talk like this. It's just everybody talks insane. The funny thing is that Dominic West, who plays Billy Rosati, is English, and he actually does that, that, hey, yo, I'm a Italian from New York type accent. He does that better than some of the other actors in it who are actually American. So even though his performance is really over the top, he's actually one of the better actors in the movie. He and Ray Stevenson are both really good, because Ray Stevenson just plays Frank Castle, like, very reserved and, grim and shit, which is good for the Punisher. Meanwhile, Billy Rosati, who's also known as Billy the Beaut because he's a, very vain, good-looking guy. Well, when he and Castle have a run-in at one point, it's at his recycling plant, and he throws Rosati into the glass bottle recycling thing, like this thing that grinds up the glass bottles, and he turns it on thinking it'll kill him, but Billy lives and ends up having his face horribly fucked up, to the point where he now has such a ridiculously scarred face that he ends up calling himself Jigsaw. He's a character from the comic books. What are you going to do? During that attack on Billy's recycling plant, Castle shoots one of his guys, who turns out was an undercover FBI agent, who leaves behind a wife played by Julie Benz, her character's name Angela Donatelli, and their daughter. And he also leaves behind an angry partner played by Colin Salmon, Agent Paul Budiansky. Budiansky wants payback, so he ends up becoming a liaison to the NYPD, and they put him on a Punisher task force, which is headed by only one person, a cop named Detective Martin Soap, who's played by Dash Myhawk. He's just here for comedic relief. He's just a fucking idiot cop who seems just like a buffoonish character who nobody takes seriously, and you actually end up finding out later on that he was feeding Frank information. So while he's supposed to be hunting the Punisher and seems to know everything about him, he's actually been feeding him information and helping him wherever he can. Billy, who now is just calling himself Jigsaw, decides he wants to apparently the undercover FBI agent had taken a bunch of his money, and instead of just assuming that it was obviously turned into the government or something, he assumes that FBI agent must have hid it somewhere in his house. So what he wants to do is he wants to go after the FBI agent's family and kill Frank Castle. So to do this, he breaks his brother out of a mental institution. His brother is Looney Bin James Rizzuto. Rizzotti? Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, Rizzotti, something like that. I forget how I pronounced it. But, yeah, he's played by Doug Hutchinson, who, if you don't know, in real life, has a history of playing creeps and assholes, and in real life actually kind of seems like a creep and an asshole. He like married a 16-year-old girl. It's a whole fucking thing. He's a creepy fuck. He looks like a creepy fuck. But usually he's good at playing characters. Like, have you ever seen him in the Green Mile or something? He was actually really good in that. For some reason in this movie, he seemed to have forgotten how to act. Because he's terrible. He tries to do the fucking, hey, yo, I'm a fucking gangster accent, and it sounds so fucking atrocious. It's like he just can't do it at all. And he's supposed to be this like really intimidating character. It's just like, but not in like if he was just supposed to be creepy. It's like, sure, this guy can play creepy, but they want him intimidating in that he's like very violent and tough. Like he eats people and shit, and like he's mean and scary. It's like, this guy ain't scary. Not like that. He can pull off creepy, but he can't pull off scary. He's like this tiny fucking guy who's not intimidating at all. But whatever. So Billy breaks him out of jail. Jigsaw breaks him out of jail. And meanwhile, Castle is working with his partner, Linus Lieberman, also known as Microchip, who's played by Wayne Knight. Microchip, of course, is a character who's responsible for giving Frank information. As the name suggests, he's like sort of a tech head. He also gets Frank guns. Basically, what we find out in the movie is that he works with a guy who used to be a criminal, that he has buy guns off the street so Frank can use them to in his war on crime. So now Castle is dealing with the fact that he killed an FBI agent. He feels bad about it, wants to retire. He tries to make amends to Angela Donatelli. She doesn't want anything to do with him. He decides that he's going to go after Billy Russo. He's trying to find him. He ends up... There's a scene... Russo did a deal with like these guys who are big fans of doing like parkour, because I guess that was a thing that was just big in the 2000s, and I guess they just needed to show that. So there's just scenes of these guys doing parkour for no fucking reason. And at one point, one of the guys does parkour and like jumps from one building to another, and while he's jumping, you see a rocket fly through the air and blow him up because Castle hit him with a rocket launcher. It's the most ridiculous fucking thing you've ever seen. You have to watch it. It's gloriously stupid. He then gets answers out of the guys who about what Billy's doing. He finds out that Billy is going after Agent Donatelli's family. So while he's going after them, he gets stopped by Agent Budiansky, who manages, him and Castle fight, and he manages to get Castle handcuffed. He takes him in. They're driving, and they send some cops over to Donatelli's house. Russo and his gang are already there. They kill the two cops. They threaten, the thing is, they're trashing the house looking for money, and then after they kill the two cops, then they finally decide to ask, where would your husband keep the money? And she reveals that there's a safe upstairs. Why didn't you just ask that from the get-go? They just trashed the house for no reason. He's looking in cabinets and stuff and throwing plates and things on the floor. You think he would hide the money there? Who hides money there, you fucking idiot? It's these things don't make any sense. They just it was almost like they just acted I don't know, just throw stuff around the house. It doesn't have to make any sense. So the FBI agent and Detective Soap, they pull up with Castle still in the back seat at fucking Donatelli's house, and Budiansky goes in, and that's when Castle says to Soap, you have to let me out, and that's when we find out that Soap has been working with Castle this whole time, and he ends up letting him go. Budiansky goes in and and he gets, the Russo's gang stops him and they take him hostage too. But then Castle sneaks in the backside. He attacks one of Russo's men and he punches him in the face so hard it caves in his face. He does this with his bare fist. Well, he's wearing fingerless gloves, but other than that, a bare fist, and he caves in a guy's face just by punching it. This movie is ridiculous. Him and Budiansky then manage to get the jump on the other guy. And Castle then just picks up the little girl and gets Donatelli's wife, and then he shoots the dude in the face with a shotgun, which Budiansky doesn't like. Then Budiansky manages to take in Jigsaw and his brother. So now it seems like, everything's all wrapped up. But not so fast. The thing is, Jigsaw had made a deal with some Russians to import a biological weapon into New York. And, this is the 2000s, so everybody's afraid about, a dirty bomb in the United States and shit like that, and they played on that. And, they even mentioned at one point how Jigsaw says, she's like, this stuff isn't leaving New York. You're getting it to, he's like, you're gonna give it to a bunch of ragheads. And it's just like, obviously they meant Arabs, Arab terrorists, because apparently they're everywhere. So, after getting caught, Russo makes a deal with the FBI, despite the fact that Russo and his gang killed 2 cops, which there's no way the NYPD would be cool with that. And on top of it, he had threatened at gunpoint the wife and daughter of a dead FBI agent. They just let him go. They signed him a deal for immunity. It's like, are you fucking kidding? There's no way the FBI would honor that. There's no way the federal government would honor it. Well, we gave him immunity. Who gives a shit? They certainly wouldn't give 2 shits if the fucking the NYPD would just fucking kill him. It's insane. So he gets a deal for immunity by fucking setting up the Russian guys. The FBI also gives him all the information they have on Castle, which leads them to Microchip. Castle, he keeps the Angela Donatelli and her daughter safe in his little hideaway, which he's got some little hidden base in a subway tunnel. And he leaves them with Microchip's criminal guy, and then goes to look for Microchip because I guess he needs information from him. He gets to Microchip's house. He finds Microchip's place trashed. Microchip's mother's dead in the worst way possible. Half her head is missing. They don't really explain how that happened. I guess she was shot. I don't know. It's just so overly gory and ridiculous. And apparently they got information out of Microchip as to where the Frank is hidden, because Looney Bin Jim goes and kills the former criminal guy, and takes Angela Donatelli and her daughter hostage. And then he and his brother Jigsaw, who's now just dressing like a fucking, some weird general, they decide to start recruiting gangsters from all over New York, and a plot to lure Castle into a trap and kill him. Frank ends up calling Agent Budiansky and Soap, saying he needs their help to set up this whole thing. Budiansky decides to even the playing field a little bit by informing the Russian guys who got set up by Russo. Their father is the head of the criminal organization, and he lets them know, it's like, hey, it was Russo who set up your sons, and I know exactly where he is. So he lets him on it. Him and his Russian gangsters go there and act like they're there to join setting up Castle, and they end up getting into a huge gunfight with Russo's men. The funny thing is, they end up getting into a huge gunfight with Russo's men. Russo isn't even in the area where they are. It's like, you think if you came here for revenge, you would wait until you actually saw the man you wanted to kill, but instead he just starts opening fire. That's when Punisher manages to jump in through a higher up window, so while their gunfight is distracting everybody, and then he just goes through and he's just killing guys left and right. I mean, in utterly ridiculous ways. There's a scene where he's outside of a room. He knows there's a bunch of guys inside, so he jams his gun through the door because part of his gun has like a rocket launcher attachment. So he jams his gun through the door and then fires the rocket launcher, which in the room just explodes and kills everybody inside. It's like, wouldn't that have also... It wasn't a big room. Wouldn't that explosion also have, like, blown the door he was standing in front of off the hinges and knocked him back? But it doesn't. At one point, he gets into a fight with Looney Bin Jim, who apparently is a very good fighter, who manages to keep Castle on the ropes a little bit. But then he manages to get away, and then he gets to this room where him and Jigsaw are standing, and in one side of the room you have Microchip tied up with Jigsaw holding a gun to his head, and the other side of the room you have Angela Donatelli and her daughter tied up, and Looney Bin Jim is holding a gun to the daughter's head. And so Castle is kind of like, well, they have hostages, and so he can't stop them, so he kind of like stands down for a bit. And Jigsaw takes his gun, shoots Castle with it a couple times, but he's wearing a bulletproof vest. But he shoots him so much that he only has one bullet left. It doesn't seem like he fires 5 shots, but I don't know. Maybe it's because Castle had already, or Punisher had already fired a few more, but whatever. So then he basically tells him, he's like, you got one bullet left. So what you're going to do is you're going to shoot one of these people, and then I'm going to let the other one go. So you either shoot the daughter, and I let your buddy Microchip go, or you shoot Microchip, and I let the daughter go. And Microchip basically says to Castle, he's like, it's okay. He's like, it's a kid. So he's like, I get it. He's like, you know, it's okay if you shoot me. And he kind of agonizes over it, but, you know, Jigsaw seems to force his hand. And at which point, Castle then shoots Looney Bin Jim in the head. Jigsaw shoots Microchip. And then he goes to shoot Angela Donatelli and her daughter, at which point Castle jumps in the way of the bullets, and since he's wearing a bulletproof vest, manages to stop him, and then he starts beating up Billy, like he starts fucking him up really good, and then he frees Angela and her daughter and tells her to get out, and then he starts fucking up Billy even more, or Jigsaw even more, until he takes like a... Billy tries to hit Punisher with like this weird pole, but he takes the pole from him and just ends up stabbing him and jamming the pole all the way through him, and then throws him into a fire pit so he burns to death. And it's just so over the top violent, it's insane. And then at the end of the movie, like, Angela Donatelli she's completely forgiven Castle now over the fact that this guy killed her husband. It seems like everybody has just forgotten now. Even Budiansky has just let it go that, you know, Frank Castle killed an FBI agent. It's like, well, he's one of the good guys. It's like he killed a dude. He killed a good man and a cop, an FBI agent. This woman's husband, this guy's partner. But they all just let him go, and he's walking away with Detective Soap. And then they kind of split up at one point. It seems like Castle just walked away while Soap was talking. And then a guy like tries to mug Soap in the park. And it was just like you're mugging a cop. It's like, dude, don't you have a gun? You're a cop. And that's when like Frank walks up behind the guy who's trying to mug Detective Soap. And it's just such a cheesy ending. Oh my god. But like I said, this is like the tail end of that over-the-top, ridiculous action movie, like the last evolution of that from the 80s to like the late 2000s. And this is like the end of that, you know. It just, the fucking ridiculous rock and roll music. Usually part of the soundtrack because it was actual like rock songs. And the rock and roll of that time was just so... I mean, it was all so kind of cheesy. Just cheese dick fucking music. I'm not even talking like the poppy sounding stuff. I'm talking like the stuff that's tried too hard to sound hard. It's just... the gore and the action and everything about that movie was just so insane. It was so cartoonish. It was actually more ridiculous than the Punisher comic books themselves. It's it was really insane. I will say this though. It was better. Their version of Jigsaw was better than the TV show version, which the actor who played Jigsaw on that show was good. He was fine. But the way they made it so, like, after his face got scarred, he just basically had, like, a cut on his cheek, as opposed to in this movie where he really looks like the comic book version where his face is all scarred up and, like, horribly marked so he looks like an actual Jigsaw puzzle. But it's just... It's so fucking insane. It's an insane movie. I highly recommend it. It's a good movie to get. It's a good movie to watch if you don't really care about what kind of movie you're watching. It's so insanely bad, it's good. That's the type of movie it is, and it's just. I'm so glad that Chelsea recommended it. It was a very good recommendation. Oh man. But yeah, that is my review of Punisher Warzone, a 13-year-old movie that I didn't care about watching for the past 13 years and was talked into watching tonight because I had nothing better to do. And just, man, did it take me back to the ridiculousness of over-the-top action movies. I miss those kinds of movies, to be honest. They weren't serious in any way. They were just about fun. Oh, man. They really were the best. Alright, I'm getting fucking tired, so that's it for me. Good night.